Good afternoon. We're live here on the show floor at Cloud Expo here in New York City. I have here with me Ajay Budhraja, who is Senior Executive and presented this morning on Cloud Analytics and Business Intelligence. Ajay, tell us a little bit about what you went over in your session this morning. It was fantastic, and I think our audience would love to hear about it.
Yeah, so in my session I talked about enterprise cloud analytics and how we can leverage analytics as a service. So I also mentioned, how we can go in that direction, because what we see now, there's a huge push towards the cloud, and analytics can be really important for all organizations. So I talked about business analytics, how we can leverage analytics at the enterprise level, not just within the organization, and how we can leverage data sets across the enterprise as well as at the higher level. So in the government, there's a huge push for open data. That's where we have the data sets, and we take those data sets and we can expose them, and then there's developers who can come in and actually build applications based on those data sets. So the point that I emphasized was analytics is not just within the organization, but a lot of that is happening at the enterprise level, at the organization levels. And also, there's a huge push on analytics as a service. Analytics is not rocket science. It's nothing that just came about, but the scale at which it's happening right now, and some of the tools that we have for analytics, analytics as a service, analytics services and tools, those are the key areas that I covered in my presentation. And I also talked about standards, how standards are important, governance, change management, how we need to look at all of that as part of enterprise analytics and business intelligence. In addition, I think there's different areas where this is used. So there's, not just analysis now, but predictive analysis in the future, how we look at that. And that's where we can predict weather patterns, we can predict traffic, fraud, if there's fraud that happens. All that is part of predictive analysis, not just right now where we are, but where we're going to be in the future. And that is the true value of analytics as a service. It's not just where we are now, but prescriptive as well as predictive analysis.
Absolutely. So today, a lot of enterprises are leveraging analytics to look at historical patterns, be able to do it in real time for sure as well. But we're still a long way from having them do predictive analytics, even though there are some tools out there. I also agree with you, analytics as a service is a big component and will become even more so as the Internet of Things starts to emerge.
Exactly.
The multitude of devices that are being connected to the network is going to compound.
Exactly.
And so organizations, enterprises, and governments are going to want to take all of that data from those devices and be able to do predictive analytics or any kind of analytics on that. The downside of that is that nobody wants to buy all of the infrastructure and make the CapEx investment in that. So then hence analytics as a service, whether it be from a cloud service provider or an outside organization who's providing analytics as a service. So can you talk to us a little bit about how enterprises should be approaching the change management component? Interesting that you brought that up, because people is really the core component of the people, process, and technology that's the hardest to change. Right. So for an enterprise, what would you recommend in terms of change management?
Well, change management is a very important element within any kind of development scenario, whenever we are developing these applications. And over my career, I've chaired change management boards as well, where we get all the stakeholders together and we look at change management and how it impacts the organization. Now, one of the areas that I mentioned was standards. It's really important to have standards and application programming interfaces as we go along, or the APIs, and to kind of aggregate all of that as services. So have a service-based solution and aggregate and tap into the APIs, and then based on that build these solutions. And cloud is a perfect vehicle for all of that, because cloud provides the true backend, it provides the storage, and for doing analytics, it's like the perfect solution. So in terms of change management, what we need to look at is how are we doing change controls? Okay, so one of the things is, as we develop these APIs, how do we do change controls within the APIs? How do we do change control at the enterprise level? How do we do change control when we tap into different APIs across the organization, and we tap into other data sets that may be outside the organization? And taking all of that into account and looking at how we can manage change with change controls, how we can actually have standard operating procedures, how we can develop plans and procedures for change management. I think that's the true value of having change management within this area. And again, there can be a lot of chaos. Just because there's so many APIs and you're trying to tap into all these areas and get the data and access the data, it's never easy. And organizations, I know a lot of organizations, they struggle with that because people are just used to, tapping into existing code within the organization. So when you go beyond that and when you do all these other interfaces, it becomes really a challenge. And change management has to be addressed at all the different levels where integration occurs. And again, it sounds like a simple word, integration, but it means a lot because we're trying to integrate into interfaces, we're trying to integrate the user interfaces, we're trying to integrate business services, we're just trying to integrate services across the enterprise. And so one of the other key elements that I mentioned in my talk was about having a layered architectural approach as you go along to develop the solution, having good layered architecture and take that into account. And then also, how do we actually take data from different areas? It can be XML, it can be Excel, it can be Access database. Take all the data and then render that in different formats. It can be PDF, it can be Excel, and so on. And so that again is the true value of analytics as we go along, because we want to make sure we can get data from multiple data sources and then take that and then render that in different formats as we go along.
So you brought up a good point about APIs. Do you think the industry should be pushing towards standardization of APIs? Today, there's a ton of APIs out there that are not standardized. Should we be pushing for that?
So, I definitely believe there should be more standardization in that area. Right now, we have, what we use is we use a lot of web services and XML. That's being used in the industry. But again, there's other standards that need to be brought about in terms of APIs, because again, we're going into a situation where we're aggregating these different services, we are aggregating the interfaces, and as we do that, more standards are really important, and that's where I think if we don't have that, then it's really hard to integrate these different components and get it together. Now, in the government, as you know, there's initiatives. There's the Open Government Initiative that says, we need to have these standardized data sets that people can leverage outside. There's other initiatives. There's a big data initiative, and that's where we need more standardization in big data as well. Obviously, there's SQL databases that have been there for a long time, relational databases, but now there's like NoSQL databases as well. And again, there's different vendors offering different solutions. So how do we take all that? We standardize the NoSQL. And again, ultimately, when you want to build these solutions, you need to take the relational databases, you need to take the NoSQL databases, connect all that, and then render it. And there's vendors already that are doing that. They have connectors, like, there's relational databases that have connectors into big data solutions. And there's, there's open source kind of areas like Apache Hadoop and so on that a lot of organizations are doing. But my concern is a lot of organizations or vendors take these standard solutions or open source and just add their flavor to it. And then when people build applications and solutions on that, and then they try to integrate all of that together, that's where it's going to be a huge problem. And one of the sessions that I attended, they talked a lot about, you can have vendor lock-in. You can actually go in and you can use a cloud solution, you can leverage a cloud solution, but you could be locked in because the cost in terms of taking that and moving to another vendor may be a lot. And it may be cost prohibitive doing that. So that's where, again, standards are extremely important. And especially, like I said, in the government, we have all these different initiatives that encourage us to have standardized data sets, use XML, use REST, and use APIs to exchange the data. That's one of the core values of this. And again, bringing it back to the point, once we have the standards, we can have effective predictive analysis. We can predict what's going to happen. I think we are moving towards an age of intelligent monitoring systems, where what's going to happen is we have sensors in these different areas. They pick up the information and then monitor that and then make decisions based on that. So, for example, if you go out on the street right now, there's traffic lights and everything's pre-programmed. Is that right? What I see in the future is you go there and based on the traffic patterns, it looks at that, and there's these intelligent systems that monitor that and then change the lights based on the volume of traffic. So that's where I think a lot of this is headed in terms of again, a lot of this promotes transparency, it promotes collaboration, it promotes revenue generation, and it promotes cost savings as we go along. Because what's going to happen is we take all this data, the big data, the relational data, and we combine that. And in the future, what it's going to do is, as we do predictive analysis, it's going to really, help us in terms of making better decisions. It's going to help us in terms of business intelligence, and it's also going to help us in terms of lowering the overall cost of doing business.
Fantastic points. Thank you for joining us today. We are live here from Cloud Expo in New York City. Thank you for joining us.